Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Mark Snider. And Mark has worked in the software field for the last 20 years and is currently employed as a senior programmer analyst at a Fortune 500 company in Columbus, Ohio. He has a B.F.A. from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and a B.B.A. from the University of Cincinnati. Mark was a competitive bodybuilder for years and won the following titles: winner light heavy class in Mr. Midwest in 1989, and overall winner Mr. Glass City in 1989. He performs as a solo fingerstyle guitarist at many venues in Central Ohio. Mark has recorded the following 2 CDs of guitar music: Living Water and Songs in the Night. In 2010, he started a radio show called Ohio Exopolitics, which is now on Revolution Radio each Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Studio B. And he also has a website you can access with incredible information at www.exopoliticsohio.us. And it is with great pleasure we invite Mark on tonight. And he also is an expert researcher in the Billy Meyer case and material, of which we will be discussing this evening. So please welcome Mark Snider to the show this evening. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great, Solaris. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's my pleasure to talk with you, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to once again talk about the Meyer material.
Oh yeah, well I consider you to be an expert. I really do. I know Michael Horn's kind of like been leading the way, but you're the man, in my opinion. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. Your philosophies and the way you approach things is on a different spectrum. It's just completely different, and it's easier to understand, shall we say?
There's so much information in the Meyer material. I really think you can approach it from different perspectives. And that's perfectly valid, I think.
Right.
I think Michael focuses a little bit more on the prophecies, and he also spends a good deal of time kind of trying to convince the UFO community that the case is real. Mm-hmm. Where I kind of dove into the spiritual aspect of it and dove into the history aspect of it, because what's really interesting about the Meyer material is it really talks a lot about human history, not only on the Earth, but in the Milky Way galaxy as well. Mm-hmm. So, and we can touch on any of that stuff that you want to tonight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think people need to hear a lot of that information, and I know you and I've covered world affairs and how they triangulate with pertaining to some of the Billy Meyer, philosophies. So perhaps we can elaborate on all that tonight as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just, for people that haven't heard of Billy Meyer, at least give a kind of a who he is and
absolutely, yeah,
where he comes from. That's right. Edward Albert Meyer. He's a one-armed farmer from Switzerland. He lives in a tiny mountain village about an hour east of Zurich. The village is called Hinterschmidruti. Billy is in his late 70s now. His name really isn't Billy. His name is Edward Albert Meyer. He's had extraterrestrial contacts going back to 1945, when he was a small boy growing up in Bulak, Switzerland. He would get these mental images and telepathic messages from an extraterrestrial man named Svath. Svath told him one day to go out and play in the forest, which he did. And Billy was in the forest there in Bulak, and he was looking down at a stream and watching these fish swim in the stream. When out of the corner of his eye, he saw this silvery pear-shaped craft descending from the sky, and it landed in the field there. And then out stepped this elderly human man named Svath, and he was wearing something that kind of looked like a diver suit. And Billy had seen his face in his mind before. He had been getting these mental images, and he had heard Svath's voice before. So he wasn't that afraid. Svath led him back into the ship and started telling him about who he was, who he had been in his predecessor lives, and what his mission during this lifetime was. And Svath told Billy that his spirit form had reincarnated on the earth at least 6 times before. and that he had been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, and that each time he incarnated on the earth, he taught an ancient universal teaching called the teaching of the Spirit. And this spiritual teaching is really the basis for many of our religions who have gone astray over thousands of years. Svath told Billy that his life was going to be difficult, that people would try to kill him, that even those close to him would turn against him. He was told that his own wife would call him a hoaxer. He was told to focus on his writings and stay in the background because the people of the earth make for themselves idols. He was warned about materialism, and Svath told Billy that the people of the earth are living a very materialistic life, and that they're not growing spiritually at all, and that they're on the path to destruction. And Svath explained to Billy that in that same year, 1945, that the United States would drop the atomic bombs on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that this would lead to a new era called the third millennium, which would last about 800 years, and it would be a very difficult time for the people of the earth, a transition period. So that's kind of my quick introduction into how this all started, and it kind of leads into what the point you were trying to make about kind of what's going on in our world today, correct?
Oh, right. Oh, absolutely. Because a lot of what he was receiving in information was, there's an echo over there for some reason, is definitely connected to a lot of what I would call, I don't want to say prophecies, but there is a correlation, let's put it that way. What does come to mind with this information now, in 1945, we know that the Germans were working on their own black space program, and I'm wondering if his experiences were based on an induction based on their technology and information versus a real off-world species. What is your impression?
My impression is he's had real off-world contacts. Mm-hmm. That's my take on it. After studying, I've really been focused on this since about 2008.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's a question people often ask, and in some ways, I almost wish that was the case.
Right, yeah, so we could just say, well, this is what it is. Well, I'm very analytical, and I like to break things down on a technological level, but I never discount off-world technology. And the one thing that I do see also is that his connection to this species is very spiritual. It's based on a higher level of consciousness, whereas psychotronic driving and warfare is always negative. I mean, you can bet your, bottom line is it's really, very negative. Let's just
right. Exactly.
So, yeah, so I do have a resonance with what you're saying on there. What was his father's profession? Were they just farmers?
That's a very good question. I think his father might have been something like a shoemaker or something. He was born into a really big family.
Okay.
There were many kids in his family. Mm-hmm. They weren't wealthy by any means. And Billy was kind of a recluse. He was having these extraterrestrial contacts at a very young age. And what's also very interesting is his Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman, the local pastor there in Bulak, also had telepathic contact with the Plejaren as well. And Billy really looked up to Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman. So that was his support.
Right. Yeah. And so does Billy still have the telepathic communication? Does he ever talk about that?
In 1995, the Plejaren left the Earth. Most of the UFO community knows these extraterrestrials as the Pleiadians. Mm-hmm. But they're not from our Pleiades. They allowed themselves to be called the Pleiadians originally. They are from some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades in a different space-time configuration. They live on a planet called Ira, around a star that they call the Pleiades star system. Ira is very similar to Earth. It has a similar ecosystem, similar plants, similar animals. In fact, the Plejaren themselves had visited the Earth in ancient times. So this extraterrestrial group, they're human. And according to the Meyer material, there are 7.5 million human civilizations in our Milky Way galaxy. Now, to make that a little more complicated, there are different space-time configurations in our Milky Way galaxy. So we have different dimensions, so to speak. The Pleiades star system is, like I said, 80 light years beyond the Pleiades. The Pleiades, they have young blue suns, and the planets there will never really completely support life. So
that's fascinating.
Anyway, I wanted to tell you, in 1995, they left the Earth, and they wouldn't tell us why. The main contact time was between 75 and 1986, and during that time, there were 2,862 extraterrestrial humans on the Earth. They were from the Plejaren star system, they were from the Tao universe, and they were from nearby stars. They resided in 3 bases. There was a base in North America, a base in Asia, and a base in Switzerland. The base in Switzerland had been here for about 350 years. Now, why they left, I really don't know. And they never said exactly.
That's really interesting. So they left in 1995. So did they leave anything behind at all? Any type of information or race or hybrids?
They didn't leave any hybrids around, and we can go into that more if you want. It's an interesting discussion. They cleared up everything associated with their bases. Now, there is still, to my knowledge, one extraterrestrial group still on the Earth. And they've been here for about 100,000 years. And they're called the Hyperboreans. And I think they have one city deep within Mount Shasta. And sometimes you can see their golden-colored spacecraft leaving the east side of the mountain sometime. They're human. Most of them are blonde, white-skinned. They have like these beam weapons that sometimes they'll use to temporarily paralyze Earth humans that come too close, and they don't really do much harm. Sometimes I've heard of them actually interacting to a certain degree with Earth humans. There's also, the Hyperboreans also have a base near the Aleutian Islands, underground somewhere there.
Can I ask you a question right now? So insofar as this race goes, is there any connection between them and the Third Reich, the Fourth Reich?
Now, are you talking about the Hyperboreans?
I'm talking about both races in general, because a lot of those areas with the bases in Antarctica were based on the Nazis. So I'm wondering, is there a correlation? Is there a history? Is there an agreement, a contract?
Well, okay. There are the Plejarans. That's one race. There are the people from the Tao universe, which are called the Timmers. There are people that have come here from nearby star systems. There are the Hyperboreans. Now, the Meyer material says that about 26 million years ago, roughly, that the Lyrians came from the depth of our known universe. They weren't known as the Lyrians then. And they settled into the oldest space-time shifted regions of the constellation of Lyra. Now, the Lyrians were they were giants by our standards. Some of them were 20 feet tall, and they were they were at the 4th and 5th level of human evolution. They could do incredible things. They came here. They came to the Earth about 20 million years ago. They came here again at about 389,000 years ago, and they actually settled on the Earth. About 1 million of them, or close, even almost 2 million, I believe. Now, they didn't stay here forever, but when they were here, there were certain crimes that were committed by these Lyrians, and they had sexual intercourse with the Earth humans, and they did also abuse some of the Earth humans. The Earth humans at that time were very underdeveloped. They were called the Evas by the Lyrians. So what happened is another group from Lyra came here, and they saw that these crimes were committed. And I'll get to the Nazis here eventually.
Okay, no, it's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So some of these Lyrians entered into a codex, which is kind of an agreement that they would become Earth humans, so to speak. They would die here and then enter into the reincarnational patterns here on the Earth, which they did. And that was how probably the first white genetic got sent to the Earth. See, the original Earth humans, according to the Meyer material, had dark skin. But the history of the Earth is very, very, very convoluted. So I just wanted to paint the picture, and I haven't painted the whole big picture by any stretch of the imagination, but I wanted to let you know that even before there was a naturally developing Earth human, there were extraterrestrial humans here on the Earth, according to the Meyer material. Now, when you talk about the Nazis were looking for their extraterrestrial roots. I don't even like to use the word Nazi because there was a man who came here during the time of Atlantis and Lemuria. His name was Eris. They called him Eris the Barbarian. And he was probably the Ishwish who had a whole group of people under him. He brought about 70,000 people with him here to the Earth, one of which was a very famous, well-known scientist by the name of Semyasa, who mated with an Earth woman, an Eva, and produced what they called at that time an Adam, which was really the basis for Earth humanity. But I think that the Nazis knew, the Nazis were very advanced, by the way, and they knew that in our ancient past there were humans who came here from other worlds and settled, and they knew that if they found more about this, they would eventually find connections to the off-world technology, which is, I think, what they were searching for. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answered your questions exactly, but Eris, I think that there is a relationship between Eris and the Aryans, mm-hmm. if you will.
Right. It seems to be some kind of a correlation between the technological advancement of the Germans, if you want to call them that, versus Nazis, and the off-world species. There's obviously a hybridization of technology that we all know about in the underground of the black programs that nobody talks about, whether that's hybridization of people or extraterrestrial craft, which we've seen. So that's one of the things I was bringing up there. And, of course, Antarctica and a lot of stuff that's happened over there. So very fascinating indeed. And if somebody wants to really understand this material, I mean, this is overwhelming for a lot of people with the Billy Meyer. So where do they start? Which book do they start with? What is your suggestion?
Oh, that's not an easy question. A good one is, and what is it called? And Still They Fly by Guido Musburger. That's a good book. I really enjoyed that book. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. There's also a website called the Future of Mankind site, which is very good. If they want to come to my site, exopoliticsohio.us, there's a Billy Meyer page. Where else can you start? Where can you go? There's a lot of YouTubes, particularly by Randy Winters. I think Randy Winters will give you a good start. And of course, there's all kinds of information from Michael Horn.
Right, and it's very important where they look because so much is watered down or distorted, and I'd like to give them a clear shot insofar as what they're looking at with the material. Now, a lot of this was actually translated from German. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is part of the difficulty with the Meyer material. The ancient Lyrians were here in our very, very, very ancient past, and their language, in some ways, is the root language of some of our languages. And in many ways, there's a one-to-one word correspondence between Lyrian and German. Now, whenever Billy writes his contact notes or writes his books in German, I don't know how he does this. Please, don't even begin to ask me. I couldn't tell you. There's an evolution code built in to what he writes, but it's only in the original German. And the reason he can only do it in the original German is because of its similar relationship to this ancient Lyrian. So when you read the Meyer material in the German, it's supposed to unlock things in your subconscious that you may not even be completely aware of. Now, I can tell you just from studying it in the English, it's unlocked things in my conscious and my subconscious. Mm-hmm. So I can't...
Can you elaborate on that, Mark? What has it opened you up to?
Wow, that's hard to put into words. Mm-hmm. The Meyer materials answered for me all of the big questions I have in life. What the purpose of our life is, who created our universe, what happens after we die, who the other extraterrestrial humans in our galaxy and universe are, who built the ancient monolithic structures all over the earth, what are the stages of human evolution. So all of these big questions that I've been interested in my whole life have been answered by the Meyer material.
Right. And not only who built them, but why, I think is the biggest thing. Why was it all done? As a remembrance? As a marker?
No. They told us flat out that they couldn't tell us yet why the Great Pyramids and things like that were built. Because the one thing they don't want to do is interfere with our natural evolution, because they've already done that. Part of the reason for this contact is because of the ancient interference in the development of Earth humanity, going all the way back to some 73,000 years ago, when the Great Pyramid was first built, going back to the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, going back to the time of the Lyrians. The Earth's history is very, very complicated. It's very, very convoluted, too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, indeed. Yeah. Pretty much throw it all out, a lot of the man-made stuff.
Yeah.
Censored and edited, yeah.
Yeah, the history of Earth is ancient, according to Meyer material.
Right, well, I think that's true. I mean, regardless of Meyer or not, but we're dealing with a very ancient civilization that was here before, quote-unquote, man's benchmark of information. There's no doubt about that. I find it fascinating. Now, do you think, because we were kind of reflecting on the space-time continuum, so do you think this space-time continuum in which we reside is anomalous and is in flux due to the actions of mankind right now on this timeline?
I don't think it's, how did you put it, anomalous in the sense that maybe unstable?
Exactly, yes.
That's a very good question, by the way. I think that's a very insightful question.
Thank you.
The older space-time configurations in the Milky Way galaxy house the more advanced human civilizations. There's an older space-time configuration in the constellation of Lyra. The Plejaren live in an older space-time configuration. There's an older space-time configuration associated to the Sirius system, and that's also linked in with this whole story. The problems here on the Earth are myriad, and I don't know, if you point me in a direction, I'll kind of start out.
Okay. Well, to me, it seems like there's what I call a parallel bleed-through effect. I use that terminology a lot because, to me, it is as above, so below. And also, what exists in other universes and star systems and alternate realities and universe does have an effect on us as we have an effect on it. So my question would be, to what degree is Earth receiving these anomalies due to the bleed-through effect and also mankind's collective?
Well, when I think of bleed-through effect, I would put it this way. In the ancient past, we had visitors here who came from not only different planets and different star systems, but different space-time configurations. Mm-hmm. One of the great things that the Earth is suffering through right now is the influence of a group called the Giza intelligences. The Giza intelligences had headquarters underneath the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid, according to the Meyer material, is 73,000 years old. There's these old ancient cubical constructions under the Giza Plateau that are some 72,000 years old. And Billy, when he was a 16-year-old boy, was taken into those old cubicle constructions by his second contact, a woman named Asket from the Tao universe. It's a very, very interesting story, if you want me to get into that.
Mm-hmm. I would. And also, what happened to those people? Are they still there? Or these beings?
The Giza intelligences were pushed off the Earth in the mid-70s, late 70s. I'm thinking 78, 79 time frame. See, well, this gets very intense. Asket, who was Billy's second extraterrestrial teacher, was a lady, again, from the Tao universe, from a race called the Timmers. The Tao universe is our parallel universe, our sister universe. It was created 46 trillion years ago. When Billy was 16 years old, he was told to go up on top of this hill one evening. It was when his contacts with Svath were ending. And he was told that a robotic craft, would come and pick him up, which it did. It landed there nearby and a hatch opened, and he felt drawn into the ship. So he went into the ship and he sat down, and there was just one chair in there. There was no one else in there. And the ship became invisible, and he became invisible. And the ship sped off to the Middle East. And it landed, and the door opened, and he got out. And he walked over to this very large rock, this big red rock, and he felt the heat coming off of it. And somehow he recognized that he was in the country of Jordan. Well, he looked up and he saw what originally looked like a falling star. And it came out of the sky and it got larger and larger and larger. And eventually there was this giant disk just hovering, and then it slowly, slowly came down to the earth. And it landed. And it sat there for a half an hour and nothing happened. And then finally, out came this striking woman, and he knew it was Asket. He knew it was his next extraterrestrial teacher. So Asket walked over to him and introduced herself, and she said they needed to leave because they were going to go to the Great Pyramid. And she had some very important things to show him. So they got in the ship, and they flew in the ship to Egypt, and they landed somewhere in Egypt, I don't know where. They got out of the ship, and she reached over and put something on his belt, and she touched something on this device that made Billy invisible. She touched something on her own belt, which made her invisible. And she explained that they were going to go into the secret passageway in the Great Pyramid, and they were going to go down into these ancient hallways, which would descend very, very deep below the earth. And Billy said, wait a minute, I feel like I know you, but I don't know how. And Askett said, I can't tell you how. You know me. But you should search your own thoughts and search your own feelings, and you'll find the answer. And she said, we're going to have to be very quiet now, because where we're going, there are people, and it would not be good for us to be discovered by them. So they went into this secret passageway, and they went down this long, long, dark corridor underground for miles. They traveled in what is called in the contact notes Egyptian darkness, which translates roughly into pitch darkness. And eventually they could see this light at the end of this hallway. And Askett again whispers to Billy, you're going to have to be extremely quiet from here on out, no talking at all. So they continue to walk, and then they come through like an opening into this incredibly giant hallway. And the light seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And there's a giant spacecraft in there. And there are guards. And Billy looks over and he sees what looks like a Y-shaped cross on the ground and what appears to be artifacts from the crucifixion. And he's just stunned by this. And he feels, on the one hand, honored to be able to see this, but he just can't make sense of it all. So Askett decides to take him back to the surface. So they make this long trip back up to the surface. And Askett tells him that since ancient times on Earth, there has been an extraterrestrial group that her people call the Giza intelligences. They were a splinter group from the Plejaren themselves, and that they, for thousands of years, had attempted to control and manipulate the people of the Earth through religions, and that they had appeared to the people of the Earth as gods, and they had appeared to the people of the Earth as angels, and that they had used a kind of technology called telenotic impulses to control the thinking of the people of the Earth. And even though the Giza intelligences have been forced off the Earth, the Meyer information says we will be under the influence of these telenotic impulses for 300 years, for about another 3 centuries. Askett also explained to Billy that the Giza intelligences had influenced the Thule Society in Germany, and that they had also influenced Hitler.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, that sounds like psychotronic imprinting, which you're talking about. Telenotic impulses is their version of psychotronic imprinting and programming. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. So I guess I even wonder if things like the Fatima vision came from the Giza intelligences. I don't know that. I don't think I've ever found anything in the higher information that would say that.
Well, you know what's interesting, Mark, is that we're dealing with a holographic planet and a holographic mind. I mean, everybody has a holographic mind. We are multidimensional. And I believe when you raise, your awareness to a certain level of consciousness, obviously we can manifest at will in our own reality. So if you have a group collective projecting an energy or a belief system, I'm sure it would manifest. So maybe they use some devices to accentuate that. I mean, it's kind of like Project Bluebeam. Nothing is impossible.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think there was a physical technology, but I do think it was related to consciousness and related perhaps to telepathy as well.
Oh, I believe that 100% because we are naturally, I mean, we cannot forget that we are spiritual beings here on this planet encased in a matrix, which is our spacesuit. And of course, with that comes our avatar abilities, even if they're not awakened. So I find this whole this Giza intelligence and everything you're communicating very fascinating. And I'm glad you're presenting this information tonight. I hope people start to absorb a little bit more and more. There's a lot of data. And of course, sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt, but there's also this philosophical message behind it all on a higher level of consciousness, which I think people should pay attention to, especially when you look at the world today.
Well, you brought up, you kind of brought up spirituality there, and Billy's official public mission didn't begin until 1975, and what we've described so far, just bits and pieces of his preparation. But in 75, he had his first contacts with Semyase, who was a 344-year-old Plejaren woman who was halfway to becoming what they call initiation. I'll try to get to that eventually. But she would land her ship in the beginning contacts right there near Hinterschmid-Ruti in the valleys or maybe on a hillside. And she would physically get out of the craft and she would walk over to Billy. And they would have these incredible discussions right there out in the open. Now, they couldn't do that for very long because people started to hear about his contacts all around the world, and he had to go out to remote locations on his moped, and she had to beam him up in the ship. They had to do all sorts of things. But in the beginning, they would have these wonderful face-to-face contacts. And you were mentioning the spiritual aspect of things, and Semyase would say these very, very beautiful poetic things to Billy. And it's taken me years to really understand what she was talking about. She said that within each human is a spirit that never dies, and never sleeps, and it will record all of your thoughts and all of your emotions, and it will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong. Now, later, the human spirit is described this way. It's often described as a part piece of the universal consciousness. The human spirit is no bigger than the point of a needle, and it resides in the very center of our brain. And I think it's called the superior colliculus, where the human spirit is located. And that area of the brain controls our eye movement, it controls our sight. But the energy associated with the human spirit goes out like a filigree web throughout the body, through every cell of the body, within the cell, on the outside of the body, it animates the whole body. Now, the human spirit was created by the universal consciousness to help the universal consciousness evolve to the next level. So the purpose of our life is evolution. The purpose of our life is to gain wisdom. But we also play a role in the evolution of the universe. And our reincarnation after reincarnation after reincarnation and gaining wisdom each time plays a role in the universe, the universal consciousness evolving, because wisdom is a kind of knowledge that produces energy. And when we produce the energy associated with wisdom, we help those around us to evolve as well. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the point of human life. Now, this human spirit is an incredible thing. She described it this way also. She said, within each human is the seat of the infinite, but few are aware of it. And she said that it takes sound logic and freedom from unreal teaching to wake up the infinite. And she said that those who are rich in spirit will reveal the spiritual realms, that they will become an instrument by which the creation reveals the spiritual realms. So she would have these very, very profound discussions with Billy. For example, one time she said, your ancient philosophers said that everything in the universe is within the human, and that the human is the microcosm within the macrocosm. Well, I didn't know what that said, know really what that meant until about 2 or 3 months ago. I think what Semyase was talking about there was the repeating patterns in creation. For example, we have in our cells, our cells are made up of molecules, and the electron rotates around the nucleus of our molecules in our body. Now there's a repeating pattern at the macrocosm in that the planets rotate around stars. If you look closely at our circulatory system, it branches. Whether it's our capillaries or our veins, they have this branching structure, much like the branching structure on trees. We have seashells, which have the spiral in them. Well, the galaxy has spiral arms. So what we have in nature are these repeating patterns. Mm-hmm. And Svath told Billy, everything in the universe is one, and it's all bound together. So one way to judge if something is real or not, is true or not, is does it reflect those repeating patterns of nature? But there's so much wisdom in the modern material. It's a little overwhelming at times.
It's wonderful. Well, that's a really good point to make, actually, and it resonates true 100%. I mean, there is a miniature universe and what I would call a celestial heritage and history in every cell and atom in our bodies. And, of course, with that comes the records and the knowledge and the frequencies associated, and those are patterns. So you're dealing with harmonics, frequency, geometric light languages, the chakra system. So it's fascinating. And, of course, the key to the universe, in my opinion, is definitely frequency and vibrational soundings. So,
well, you said something there, or you hinted at something about knowledge and about memories. And one interesting thing that happens when the human spirit reincarnates, it occurs, I think it's 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg. And the universal consciousness will take your human spirit and put it in the body of the child. And the embryo then will become animated, and it will start its consciousness-based evolution. Before that point, it was evolving based on impulses from the storage banks, impulses from the universe. Now, something else very fascinating happens. Something called the consciousness block comes down from the universal consciousness, and it places the wisdom of our predecessor personalities into our subconscious and all those previous life memories. Now, as the child is growing back up, and his consciousness every lifetime has to relearn. But what happens is the subconscious sends inspiration to the newly developing consciousness. And the wisdom of those predecessor personalities are inspiring the conscious mind of the child. And also, impulses are coming down from the storage banks. And that way, that's the typical way that wisdom is carried over from lifetime to lifetime. Now, people do have legitimate past life memories at times, but typically at our current level of evolution, we don't have past life memories. But eventually we'll have complete memory of all of our lives, but that occurs much, much later. The Pleiadians say that we here on the earth are a stage 2 society out of 7 evolutionary steps. And they tell us that part of our population has moved into stage 3, which they consider intelligent. So a lot of our society hasn't yet got to what they call the intelligent stage. Mm-hmm. Now, there are 4 higher levels than that. So, but you were talking, you mentioned, you either mentioned wisdom or memories. I forget which
Right,
one.
at the cellular level, I'm a firm believer that we do contain every past lifetime and future lifetime. I mean, we have all that data that we are able to access through higher consciousness and levels of frequency and higher consciousness integrated in. And of course, that we call those soul extensions that are aspects of us that exist simultaneously in other universes, alternate realities. I mean, that's a given, whether you like it or not, because we're multidimensional, and most people don't pay attention to that. And then, of course, you have the past lifetimes, which, of course, unless you have severe trauma, usually they don't show up unless there's something there that's haunting you at the cellular level, and then, of course, it will surface, because those things need to be cleared and moved on through frequency. What I will tell you is there is a dumbing down, and I know you know this, deliberately done to the masses here, and they're being misinformed deliberately. With information, whether it's schools or religions, so that they're not able to grow and bypass their natural celestial heritage.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
And that's huge. And the way to get through that is through frequency. But if you look at what's going on across the globe right now, it is all a dumbing down. I mean, there's nothing but hostility happening.
It's interesting you say that. Recently, a friend of mine translated Contact Report 72, and it was describing the fact that the people in Billy's group over there in Figu are going to be reincarnating quicker, because the Plarians say, how did they put it? A time of confusion and maliciousness is about to come over the earth. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to offset that by the teaching that's coming out of Switzerland right now.
That's really good to know. Well, it seems to me like you have to ask yourself why the polarization? Why is this happening? And to me, it reflects a disconnection from spirit or source, what I would call source, which means that they're not fully integrated in with higher consciousness. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing on this world.
Yeah, exactly. Billy describes the universal consciousness. He has a great set of writings, which you can't get a hold of, by the way. The only reason I even know about them is because there's partial translations of them up on the Future of Mankind site.
Nice.
And they're about love. And what he says is that the incredible splendor of nature is nothing more than the visible expression of the love of creation. And that creation radiates love, so that every moment and every day and every place we can feel the radiating love of creation. And we should be able to look at a tree and see the radiating love of creation, because love is the highest principle of creation. And from that principle, everything follows in absolute logic, and that every tiny plant and every tiny animal in creation fulfills its purpose in creation, and that only man can close himself off from the love of creation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happened in our third millennium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of like a Zen. It's very, very Zen, what you communicated, like the Zen masters. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's like their auras have been closed up because of their anger and their rage and their judgment and everything that's holding them in limitation, which is usually the lower astral energy field, But yeah, there's no connection to source. There's no connection to the higher self, oversoul, superconscious, what I'd like to call. And I don't say that with any type of judgment. It's an observation of what's happened here across the globe. And I think that Billy's teachings, and this is what I like about his material, is that it's not just about La La Land with UFOs, but we're talking about a message behind it all, a philosophical imprint, which is very pretty, and it's very beautiful when you think about it. It's very well said. And to me, it has a spiritual signature to it, which I think is significant.
Right. Does it remind you of Nazis?
Not at all. But then there's good and evil everywhere, obviously. But you do have to look at what they were working on. We had the Nazi Bell back then, and we had the Vril Society and all these other things. So they were working on craft.
Oh,
and, you just kind of put two and two together. Now, Billy was also tracked by government. Was that correct?
Oh, it's a long story. 1975, the public mission began, and the world found out, and people were traveling as far as from Japan to see the man's photographs and his films and to talk to him, just to hear him speak. Colonel Wendell Stevens came over starting in 1975, and he came over for roughly 5 years, and he brought with him an investigation group that consisted of Lee and Britt Elders and a man named Thomas Welch. And what they did was they analyzed his photographs, and they sent many of his photographs back to Jim Delatoso, who was a photographic expert in Arizona, who found that they, as far as he could tell, were all real, not hoaxes. They also gave Billy the equivalent of a lie detector test, but it's much more stringent than a normal lie detector test, which he passed. They also analyzed metal samples. He had metal samples that the Plejaren had given him. The metal samples were given to an IBM scientist named Marcel Vogel, who looked at the ores and the way they were put together, and he said, I know of nothing on this earth that would allow these kinds of metals to be put together. There was kind of evidence of a cold fusion in these metals, and there was also evidence of micro machining. They analyzed the sound recordings from the ships, and as far as they could tell, there was nothing on Earth that would produce a true exact copy of the sounds like that. They also interviewed the other people there in Switzerland who have had seen the ships. A few of them, very few, have seen the extraterrestrials themselves. And all of them said the case was real. So what you have here is something very, very important. What's interesting, and I know this from my own experience back, and it's going to sound strange to you, but, you know, when you compete in a bodybuilding contest, they take photographs of you, and you're moving, and there's changing lighting, and you'd be lucky to get 10 photographs that were any good out of 40. Mm-hmm. So I know when you're photographing moving things and how things can look strange and bizarre sometimes. And some of the photographs of the Meyer stuff looks sometimes bizarre. Now, Billy had a camera. Now, you have to understand, this man is very different from you and I. He had a camera that he had just found that someone threw away that was stuck on a specific setting. And that's what he took all his pictures with. He was very, very much against materialism. And that goes back to his original teacher, Svath, who warned him that the people of the earth were extremely materialistic. And he warned him not to fall into materialism. In fact, Semjase would explain that the people of the earth are what they call materialistic intellectual thinkers, and that we're weighed down with the grief of this world and the cares of this world, and even things like our lust for adventure is part of this materialistic society, and that we've totally shut off the deepest intuitions from our human spirit, which is our connection to the universal consciousness, is what you were kind of referring to.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, possessions possess you after a while. I mean, that's the bottom line. And it's all a form of energy when you think about it. But if I were to do a flip side of the Earth right now, or try to merge this planet to a very high level, I would say we could manifest at will everything. We wouldn't need possessions. We wouldn't need automobiles. We could phase shift and bilocate to other sectors in the universe. We would be telepathic on a positive level, not on a psychotronic war game. So, I mean, we could really turn it around on a certain level of consciousness, and I suspect that these off-world species do that, the ones that have achieved a certain level of spiritual enlightenment and awareness.
There's a great book Billy has called The Psyche, and on page 118, it says basically what you're saying. It says, the tremendous might of thoughts has not been discovered only in our day, even though its right application, still new to the human being of today, and to him appears like a book with 7 seals. This is so because the mass of human beings are hardly conscious of the might, because this was kept secret from them for thousands of years by those who were accurately informed and in the know. Under the punishment of death, they were often forbidden to reveal their knowledge, their cognitions, and their ability. As strictly forbidden knowledge and an enormous amount of nonsense, as well as everything real, actual, truth-based, and in accordance with the laws and recommendations, was assimilated into the secret sciences to which no normal outsider ever had access. A fact that today, still in the 20th century, its realness cannot be denied. Even today, much of the unmeasurable knowledge of humankind, which has been collected over tremendous periods of time, is hidden in the inaccessible secret sciences and will be defended until the death of the Pope, the bigwigs, and those of the secret sciences, which bring them tremendous life-affirming benefit, progress, success. Then religions and politics will be eradicated in the shortest possible time. The financial industry will disappear. War, unpeace, hunger, and all the terrible things of the world will suddenly come to an end.
Wow, that's fascinating. Very prophetic indeed. Look at what's happening across the board today. And you know, I always get a little annoyed with the Vatican and all this, the data that they've stolen and acquired at the blood spilled by so many who were enlightened beings. I mean, we all know that. You know, the mystics, the prophets, the scientists, the great minds that were butchered and persecuted over the centuries, all of their data was stolen and taken and hoarded by these people who wanted to maintain a control over the mass collective. And so when you talk about secret sciences, there's a lot to be said about the bad guys versus the pure enlightened beings who actually were the originators and the creators of the technology versus the ones that stole it and started to reverse engineer it or hoard it or hide it and now are deploying it across the board here.
I think Billy has said that the Library of Alexandria, if it hadn't been destroyed, we'd be a true spacefaring society right now.
I agree. Totally true. Oh, yeah. Well, look, it's in our DNA. The beauty of it is they can try and steal it. They can try and butcher people who are enlightened and murder them. But the bottom line is it's in your cells and your atoms, and it activates through frequency and higher consciousness. That's the universal gift. And thank goodness it's there because we all have it. Although with all the drama that's going on in this world, people are getting derailed and distracted, as you know, and they're not willing or able to pierce that dimensional veil to acquire that information. Some do. And you've seen the patents even for free energy, how it gets confiscated and the people sometimes even get taken out.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. What's interesting right now is that so many things are happening across the globe. I don't see how that the mainstream can stay in their coma much longer.
No, not at all. Well, they're being forced. They're going to be pressured and maneuvered out of that corner that they're in right now. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the riots in Missouri.
That's madness in motion right there. But, it's not a surprise to me. None of this is surprising me at all. I mean, I've been watching things from afar and observing mankind, and, it just seems like a play, like a script going, and it's just going scene by scene by scene.
Well, I think it's the Henoch prophecies in the Meyer material that say that our societies are not true societies yet, and that will become apparent in the near future.
Right. Well, the people are a byproduct of their teachings, of their belief systems, and their programming. And they've had programming whether they like it or not since childhood. So, take a good look at what's happening here in America. I mean, people are basically showing their true colors, and it's some of it's not very pretty, if you ask me. And then there are those of us who are very spiritual who are able to ride these tides out and are looking at things from a very different parallel view.
And the other thing is the destruction of nature right now with these incredible fires. The fire in Washington State, the Carlton Complex fire, is the biggest fire in the history of Washington State. And then last year we had the third biggest fire in the history of California, the Rim Fire. And these are all these natural disasters. They're prophesied in the Meyer material. Especially what's really bizarre at all these giant fires is they have something called fire nados that maybe we can talk about.
Absolutely. We're going to head for a break real quick, everybody, but when we come back, we'll be discussing those fires. Stay tuned. Dark Matter Radio Network. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Mark Snider, discussing the Billy Meyer material. And Mark, you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Oh, so formal. Miss Solaris will do.
Miss Solaris. Yes, Miss Solaris.
Oh, no, that doesn't sound good either. SBR. You know, it's funny. So we not funny, actually, but we were talking about the fires, and I did want you to elaborate a little bit on that also. But I do want, before we do that, I want to make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you, and also how to find your incredible interviews and information on your own website.
Okay. If you Google Ohio Exopolitics, you'll find the main website, which is www.exopoliticsohio.us. And from there are links to my Revolution radio show, which is on Saturday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. I also have a Blog Talk radio show on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and a Billy Meyer page. If you click on the picture there on the front of Billy Meyer, you'll go to the Billy Meyer page and get overwhelmed with a lot of information. Also, on that front page are a whole lot of interviews, and you're welcome, and they're all free. I try to do everything free. I haven't gotten involved yet with, the monetary side of this yet. I don't know if I'll go there or not.
I agree with you on that one. Sometimes it's easier just to kind of, present the data for free. But what an impressive website you have. And, of course, you've had some hard hitters that you've interviewed, some fantastic people, very professional and knowledgeable. So I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, you're quite
there's a lot of very, very interesting people out there.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of knowledge. And the funny thing is, you see all this mainstream mumbo-jumbo garbage, and on mainstream television. It's all mind rot, what I call mind rot. And then you have, intelligent conversations with people who are really enlightened and informative about so many different things. That's what I love about alternative media, because you get to interview people who actually do have a lot to say that's quite valid.
Yeah, and it's out of the box.
Mm-hmm. No censorship. Yeah, there's none of that, you can only say this or that, and this is the script. I'm like, no. That's you have to speak from the heart and the soul and the spirit, and of course, knowledge and wisdom come with that.
You know what's interesting is the Billy Meyer material is so controversial, and boy, I'm not a controversial person. Mm-hmm. It's strange. I find myself thinking, well, how did I get involved in this? Right. Because it generates so much. I don't know if the word is animosity or conflict. I'm like, why can't people of the earth just give the man a hearing,
Right. Exactly.
If you don't want to believe that he's had extraterrestrial contact, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Just listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, I think that they put a negative spin on everything with judgment, with too many eyes of judgment is really what it boils down to. Instead of just showing that they're semi-intelligent and just kind of observing things, you can be neutral. I'm not saying everybody has to digest every bit of information, but I'll tell you what, there have been a lot of us here who have actually told the truth and communicated the truth, me being one of them. And, of course, I've been on the brunt of those storms also, where people just don't get it, they don't want to get it, or they're in denial. I mean, there's so many components to it, and we're not here to convince anybody of anything. We're just presenting data, and it's up to them to access things accordingly. But hopefully not with this negative spin and troll approach.
Yeah, I never try to convince anyone.
No, not at all. I know I'm not playing that card. I can't believe I'm doing what I'm doing right now on this timeline, to be honest with you, Mark. I mean, I had better things to do. But I do enjoy doing radio shows, but man, it's weird. Spin the wheel and watch it roll, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just taking forever for people to wake up. It seems like it's taking so long.
I agree. I call it the waiting room, and I actually address this in one of my books, Transmutation Through Ascension, my first book I wrote. But it literally is about just being in a room in between spaces, between worlds. And I don't see people awakening. I mean, they're going into sort of a shock and a minor awakening when it comes to worldly affairs and this and that. But when it comes to the bigger scenery, boy, they're just completely out of the loop. And if you start talking covert technology or anything pertaining to off-world intelligence, forget it. I mean, they're just not going to grasp it. So,
and I think that's part of the mind control, though, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of it is a dumbing down, and not that they're stupid or anything, but they haven't been informed, and now they don't want to be informed. And to them, it's they're afraid to be informed. It's almost like they're afraid to take that next step. And unfortunately, in order to evolve and grow spiritually, you're going to have to go forward. I mean, you have to move the energy, and that's through knowledge, wisdom, and education. So,
I think what is going to be very, very important is for people to start understanding history. because once we really get a handle on our real history, then a lot of other stuff I think is just going to go away.
I agree, but that's another thing too. It's kind of like having people come forward and actually communicate the truth about covert technology and UFO reverse engineered craft. I mean, how many people do you know? I mean, we do have whistleblowers, but how many people are actually willing to do that? I mean, these people have secured employment. They're worried about their families and their future. But what saddens me is they will have no future. At the rate we're going and the direction we're going, there is no future for them or their family either.
Yeah.
It's a lose-lose scenario.
Exactly.
Unless they, deploy themselves off-world. I mean, if they want to just go ahead and go someplace else, which, the Breakaway Society has talked about, and I don't discount that at all.
What's interesting right now is Elon Musk, the billionaire who is trying to send a group to Mars in 2026 or something like that. I mean, if he pulls that off, that's going to be huge.
Well, then there's Mars and then there's Mars, right? How many times have we been there already through the Black Space program?
And do we have a connection to Mars already?
Right. And there's one thing I was going to ask you. I do want to cover the forest fires, but I was going to ask about what was Billy's impression of the moon? Did he ever touch base with that data?
Oh, boy, you've touched on something very complicated there.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally. I don't claim to be an expert in this particular, but that is a great question. Boy, you could probably do a whole show on this.
I know. I'm going to have you back, Mark. That's all there is to it. So.
Oh, thank you. Billy has a picture. Let's just talk about controversial. That he supposedly took from Semyasis spacecraft, where they had traveled evidently back in time. And you can see 2 moons around the Earth at that time. I don't have any other explanation than that. The other aspect of the moon that's interesting is there used to be this giant comet that used to come through our solar system, on a regular basis, on a cyclic basis. They called it the Destroyer Comet. Mm-hmm. And it would typically pull very large things in its tail along with it. And I think the moon was brought in by that Destroyer Comet. Now, I do know this, and this is from the contact notes, that it says that one pass through our system with this Destroyer Comet ripped a moon off of the planet Uranus and deposited it where the planet Venus is now. So the planet Venus in our ancient past, hundreds of thousands of years ago, was actually a moon of another planet in our solar system. So now it's the second planet that revolves around the sun. Okay, and I'll just go a little deeper down the rabbit hole here since we started. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, I don't even know the exact date, there were 2 civilizations besides people on the Earth. There were people on Mars. There was a civilization. There were animals, plants. On Mars, there was a civilization with pyramids, with space stations. And there was another planet in our solar system, according to the Meyer material, that had a civilization on it with an ecosystem, plants and animals, the whole 9 yards. And it used to be that there was Mercury, then Earth, then Bellona, and then Mars, and then, unless I get my information incorrect, I think after that was Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Trans-Pluto, and Uni. So in a very, very ancient past, Mercury, Earth, Bellona, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Trans-Pluto, Uni. At about 10,300 years ago, something of that effect, when the Destroyer Comet came through, it ripped off one of Uranus's moons and then deposited it into the second orbit around the Earth. Now, during one pass of this Destroyer Comet, it wrenched this planet Bellona out of its orbit. And in ancient times, the Destroyer, large comet, this thing was bigger than the Earth, which our scientists will scream and yell about and tell you that's impossible. It was 1.72 times mass of the Earth. It penetrated the Mars orbit and it wrenched Mars into another orbit. It moved Mars into the orbit of Malona, where it stayed in that orbit. Now, Malona started to drift away. But the people there, when this great destroyer comet came through, it killed many of the people that were on Malona. But they finished their own planet off. Maybe 40, 50 years after that, there was a great war on Malona. And the people there, they diverted an ocean into this giant volcano, which caused the whole planet to explode. And that planet, at least according to Meyer material, became our asteroid belt. Now, during the process of Malona exploding and the destroyer comet coming through, one thing led to another. Eventually, Mars lost its atmosphere. A lot of the people, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the people on Mars came to the Earth. Now, there was, I believe, some kind of genetic manipulation or engineering that took place to help the people from Mars to be able to survive here. But the real interesting story to me about the civilizations on Mars and Malona is that they weren't indigenous to our solar system. They too came here. They came from the Sirius system and not from the Sirius system in our space-time configuration. Remember I said there were different space-time configurations? Yep. Well, these Sirians were descendants of the Lyrians, and they were very, very advanced genetic engineers. And I think to offset some of the aggression of the Lyrians warred among themselves. They had horrible issues with war. Anyway, this one group left the Lyra constellation and went to the Sirius system. And they genetically engineered out of themselves the ability to fight. So they had no much of a fighting spirit left. And they ran into great problems because of that. So they engineered a human being with a lifespan, a limited lifespan of about 120 years. And they hyped up their aggression to make them good warriors. And they did this with several different races of people. And they were extremely good fighters to the point where they started to threaten these people that had literally genetically engineered them. Now, the Meyer material says these genetically engineered humans fled. So they wouldn't be killed because they were going to be destroyed by these Sirians. And they left with people that were part of this civilization at Sirius who had compassion on them. Now, these people were called the benefactors. They're also called the creator overlords. So there were two races that came to Mars and Malona. One group was the genetically engineered people with the shortened lifespan and the heightened aggression. The other people were directly descended from the Lyrians, and they still had the long 1,000-year lifespans. So they settled together on Mars and Malona. Eventually, when Mars and Malona were destroyed, some of these people came to the Earth. So this genetic defect, so to speak, has been passed on to all the people of the Earth. And now we all have these limited 120, 130-year lifespans, and we all have this hyped-up aggression. So that gives you a completely different perspective on extraterrestrial contact. You probably wouldn't want to say in the future we travel to another world and we come across a race of people that are highly aggressive and say they only have 25-year lifespans. Would you want to become too closely associated with them? Would you want to mix your genetics with them
Right.
and have a lifespan only 25 years?
Well, a lot of it has to do with programming, as I mentioned before, and a lot of that is also due to frequency, as we know, that will change the behavioral pattern of people. I find it very, very interesting. Now, it seems to me like it's already happening here on this world. I mean, you have people that have been kind of complacent insofar as their warrior skill goes. Even their analytical skills are kind of out the window. And then you have other people who are extremely violent, and there's no spirituality, yet they run the mask of spirituality. So it's like a flip-flop here. But one thing I will say, I'm well aware that planets can cloak by dimension in pertaining to frequency. In other words, we have so many different dimensions that exist simultaneously, as I was discussing. But the frequency will cloak the signature of the planet, and that includes like celestial craft. And I don't know if Billy talks about that at all, but you're kind of reflecting on that a little bit about, just because we're looking into the universe, we're not really seeing the bigger picture, on the multifaceted picture, because there's so many things that are cloaked in frequency out there.
Boy, yeah, what you're saying is so true. The Plaren have the ability to make their ships completely invisible. Mm-hmm. At one point, Billy and Semyase were orbiting the Earth, and they were watching the Apollo-Soyuz hookup. When Apollo was hooking up with the Russians, and I forget what year it was. Maybe it was late 70s or something. And they were very close to the craft. Of course, they were completely undetected. There were other extraterrestrial craft up there at the time that were completely undetected by the Apollo group or the Soyuz group. And not only that, it gets even weirder, and I don't know how they can do this, but they do it. They can reveal a craft to people in a specific line of sight, but people outside of that line of sight will not be able to see the craft. I don't know how that is done, but they can do that as well. So and then these other, I resisted the whole idea of these other space-time configurations for a while. I just didn't like a universe that complicated. I don't know.
Well, I do, but any place but here for me. But it's interesting. Now you touched on people are switched on. They're either switched on or switched off. When I say that, I mean multidimensional sight, psychic vision that we all have, and we're all wired into whether we want it or not. I mean, it's just a matter of being able to access it accordingly. Now, it sounds to me like some of these extraterrestrial crafts are able to trigger that, or at least activate through a frequency where certain people, yes, can see this thing, or can see the craft or the extraterrestrials, or even communicate, whereas a lot of people who are not switched on will not see a thing.
Oh, that's very true. One of the interesting things, I talked about these 7 evolutionary steps that humans go through, and the Plaren are at the 4th and 5th stage of evolution. One of the things that happen when you become a 4th stage society, they call it real life. And not only can you create artificial intelligence, but you can create artificial intelligence that's organic and it's sentient. Semyase's ship, the central computer system, had an organic artificial intelligence that was, my understanding is sentient. It was self-aware. She could communicate with that chip telepathically. So in all senses of the word, that ship was a living being with a metallic hull. Mm-hmm. It was alive. Now that boggles my mind.
Oh, sounds familiar to me. I mean, especially where I come from with the psychotronics and the synthetic telepathy. But I will say, I'm a firm believer that we have sentient intelligence, without a doubt. We have the natural ascended, what I call ascended machine technology, which is based on sentient and intelligent control, which is based on off-world species. And then we have the manufactured stuff that's in the undergrounds, which is all about psychotronic hardware and their version based on an artificial intelligence that they've wired to create synthetic telepathy, which, of course, I was interfaced with a lot of that technology. But it takes a real psychic to be able to interface with it to begin with, and that's something that people need to be aware of. I mean, we're all naturally telepathic when we choose to be, so you have to pay attention to that as well. But now that we've touched on a lot about this technological stuff, what about the transhumanism that seems to be showing its teeth these days?
It's funny you bring that up. I got an email from Michael Horn that said transhumanism is actually dehumanism. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I believe him.
Contact 251 is where it talks about the robotic peoples, which are going to come to power before too long. It says they will amputate their own arms and legs and have their nerves connected to machinery, and they will operate space vehicles. They'll be a different race of people. They're called the robot peoples.
They're modifying themselves. Well, they're engineering themselves. You know, what's interesting, though, with regular celestial races, shall we say, you can naturally drive a ship remotely with consciousness and telepathy. I mean, that's a given. That's, once again, that's that natural ability, that the symbiotic relationship between the person, the driver, and the craft. I mean, that's natural, but what they're doing is enhancing it and distorting it through their technological interface, which I think is very dangerous. Just from my own personal experience, it's very dangerous water to tread on, because you're dealing with programming people's minds and switching them on and off, also deprogramming them insofar as taking out personal memories or things that are significant and then replacing them with a false database. That's scary. I want to swear, but you know what I mean. Yes, this is G-rated show. But seriously, I mean, it's not good. It's just not good. I mean, unfortunately, it's being weaponized opposed to let's do something really positive and constructive with it. And I'm sure they have avenues where they're doing good things, but there's a real dark side that's surfacing with that.
Well, let me read something here from Contact 251. It says these entities will oppose their creators. And there's another kind of entity besides the robotic humans, which are coming in the future. They're called the semi-humans, and they're produced by us crossing humans and pigs. Well, this is one of the prophecies. Okay, it gets weird.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It does.
The entities will oppose their creators, like it is also the case with the robotic humans, who will have arms and legs amputated so that their nervous system can be attached to minute electronic biological devices, whereby these semi-humans become living navigational devices for spaceships and every kind of weaponry and terrestrial vehicles, to name a few. That's one of the things it says about the robotic peoples. It also says they will demand the Eurasian region for their homeland when the semi-humans, those human animal, genetically manipulated creatures, and the robot humans will be creating tremendous problems. These difficulties will lead to the deplorable decline of every space travel program and nearly bring space travel to a standstill. The problem will come about because of the robot humans and semi-humans' refusal to continue to work for normal human beings. So these are some of the weird Meyer prophecies about the future. I know there are some prophecies in 251 that they say will not occur now because of certain events. You know, we've actually improved in our thinking a little bit since World War II.
What was the year he wrote that?
Contact 251. Let me double check here real quick. That was written 1995, February.
Very interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, the technological war is on. It's covert, but now it's showing itself more and more. And of course, now that they're talking about brain links and this and that with regular iPhones and things like that coming down the pike. And I'll tell you what, you need to talk to someone like me who's been interfaced with the technology, before you start doing stuff like that.
Well, I've heard the Google brain.
It's no good. It's no good, Mark. And, I can't see anything positive out of it. I tried to when I was first inducted, and I'm not going into specifics here on the show, but I really tried to look at the most positive aspects of the technology for people who had issues, neurological issues or blind or deaf or whatever. But you know what? You're talking about somebody who's playing puppet master with your body and your mind and your spirit and your soul. And that's, the soul is immortal. It's advanced. It's amazing and phenomenal, and to do something to distort it and contort it into some sort of a man-made mechanism is just not right.
Well, it says that then the robot people will become a true menace to normal humans, and this is another thing that really intrigued me. It says that these robot peoples will have unforeseen consciousness-related powers, and I was surprised by that.
Does he elaborate?
Well, yeah, he does to a certain extent. He says, over time, they will further develop these powers by way of above normal application of their consciousness, whereby the brain, through unique, painstakingly constructed energy generators, will be endowed with special energies from the outside. All of this will allow the forces of the consciousness to perform at record levels.
Well, the conscious mind would, the mental body, emotional body, I mean, you're talking about the neural circuitry would speed up, but consciousness, that's outside the box. So that's another thing I would argue, that they cannot map consciousness, nor can they control, manipulate consciousness. That's a universal, beautiful celestial energy signature, but
I hope
yeah,
so.
they'll try.
I,
no,
I hope so.
conscious thought, yeah, they'll go after that without a doubt. But I find that so interesting. And of course, Billy's not doing much writing anymore. Is he completely stopped?
Oh, no, he's writing like crazy.
Oh, he is? Okay, great.
Yeah, he's not writing contact notes very often. His contacts only occur like once a year. Mm-hmm. They left in 1995.
And they didn't tell him why?
They never told him why. I don't even know if we want to know, to tell you the truth. It's kind of spooky to me.
Right. Yeah, abandoned ship kind of thing? Or
I think it's probably something like that. The two of his fantastic books, one's called The Psyche, which I'm now reading for the second time. The first 12 pages, honestly, I read 15 to 20 times, trying to get a handle on what it was saying. The other one that I've just started reading for fun is called The Might of Thoughts. So those are two books. They've stopped translating things into English. There are other people that are translating some of his material into English, but they've finally come to the conclusion it's almost impossible to correctly translate some of this material.
Right. I can imagine. And how many people are really taking his material to the point you are? I mean, you're really diving in and looking at this on so many different levels. How many people do you think are really into his material to that degree?
I wish more.
Yeah.
I'm trying. That's why I do my shows so much.
Yeah, you have a great show. I like the way you present the information. As I said, it's very philosophical. It makes you think, and it touches and tunes into more of a spiritual design versus the man-made and just talking about regular abduction and contactees and things like that. So,
well, I think it's probably the key to our survival.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that right now we're in what I call a red zone. I think this planet is in a red zone, and whether people are acknowledging it or not, I mean, you can live in La La Land and smile and laugh every day if you want, but it's not going anywhere. We've got to deal with what's happening here on this world. There's no doubt about that.
Well, some of the interesting things he said about the third millennium in the book, The Goblet of Truth, he said that. Oh, by the way, did I quote my one favorite paragraph in The Goblet of Truth? That's entitled "What the Truth Knows to Say."
I don't think so.
Can I quote that?
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
Because I don't get it exactly the way it's written, but it's close enough. I have the notes here. I don't want to read them. I'd rather use my memory. He says that this paragraph is entitled "What the Truth Knows to Say," and it goes on to say, rivers, lakes, streams, the earth, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms are on a journey through time, which involve many, many lifetimes. And that death is just the passage to rebirth into the world of pure spirit. And many of these creatures are connected by psychic vibrations, and they are aware of each other, and they communicate with one another. And none of these creatures try to rise up above those of their kind. This is the indissoluble web of life. And I always add to this that if you go into the forest and you listen, you can hear the birds singing, for example. And I talked about creation radiating love before. Now, I think, it's just my theory, that the birds sing in part because they sense the radiating love of creation. But you also hear the crickets and the cicadas and all the different kinds of frogs and peepers and different birds as they communicate with one another. And if you watch the birds when they fly in a flock, they move as a single unit because they're aware of these psychic swinging waves, as Billy calls them. The same thing with the fish in the stream or the lake or the ocean. They move in schools in unison because they're all connected by these psychic swinging waves, schwingen in the German. Billy describes the human this way. He says we have a psyche which is half material. It's what controls our material-based thoughts and feelings, but we also have something he calls the Gemut, which is in our spirit body. It's our connection to the creation. It provides the psyche with these psychic swinging waves. Now, we were talking earlier about the power of our thoughts. You see, the power, the impetus of our thoughts streams in from the universe itself. So the might of our thoughts is really incredible. Mm-hmm. Now, at the 5th stage of human evolution, some human beings become what they call the king of wisdom or the Ishwish. And at this level of evolution, we can do telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, look into the future, look into the past. We can literally, sometimes they even say teleport. Now, these are the kinds of abilities that the human really has. And that's why Semyasi said that within each human is the seat of the infinite. Now, Billy has another book he wrote. It's called Om Fallen Murado, Life's Navel in the Ancient Lyrian. And it talks a little bit about the powers of our thinking and the might of our thoughts. It's one of his tremendous books as well. He, I don't know, I'm trying to find in my notes here.
It's so beautiful, Mark. I mean, everything you're communicating is just gorgeous, beautiful information.
Thank you. Okay, here it is. He defines, this is going to sound really strange. He says that genuine love is eternally consistent, and it's absolutely independent of the human being's age, their appearance. He calls it wisdom-conditioned love. And what love is, he says, is a harmonious state of absolute connectedness with all things. Now, it says, so the knowledge and wisdom acquired this way, through meditative concentration on the reality of a thing, results in the experience of love. Billy says that true love can be enhanced more than anything else by your observational meditation on nature. The ability to exercise such a concentrated observation is something we Earth humans rarely possess and must be developed through hard ongoing practice, often over a period of many years. And this is what I was trying to get to before. The more the monstrous powers of consciousness grow in him, he may, through the created knowledge and ability, employ these capabilities. Therewith, he really does open up himself for all creational powers that stream into him out of the infinite vastness of the universe in a living current of love. So
well said.
That's what the Meyer material is really all about. It's trying to wake up the human spirit in each one of us so that we rediscover our connection to nature, our connection to all things. Because what is happening in the 3rd millennium, the age that we live in, is that our leaders are becoming megalomaniacal. They are taking away our rights of self-determination. But the people are equally as guilty because we have become indolent. We're lazy. We've also become obtuse. We were talking about that earlier. The people that are becoming dumbed down. But there's also something else that's happening. It's a kind of ambivalence where people, they don't want to be bothered. They just, how does he describe it? Therefore, you are becoming ever more indifferent to one another, more mistrustful of one another, and increasingly emotionless, disinterested, indolent, and obtuse in interpersonal relationships, which is causing simple human connections to be destroyed and entire families to be ruined. Under such unbearable circumstances, many amongst you will feel blazing anger rise up in you and will therefore torment other fellow human beings or extract bloody revenge on them. So that's what these are some of these prophecies for the third millennium. Now, we're running close on time. If you had a...
Oh, you're good. You just keep going. Yeah, you're fine.
There is... Let me explain the Henoch prophecies from this perspective. The spirit of Edward Albert Meyer, the human spirit, is said to have reincarnated on the earth 6 other times. Well, those are the major reincarnations. There are more incarnations than that even. But he's been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. In 9308 BC, his incarnation came as the prophet Henoch. They call him Henoch. Henoch, in 9300 and some BC, wrote prophecies about the North American continent and what will happen in our future. And one of the things it prophesies about are these rolling walls of fire. And I didn't know what they were talking about. It talks about firestorms. I didn't know, what do you mean a firestorm? What's a firestorm? Well, what is happening in the West now, in Alaska and in Canada, are when these fires, they get so large, they start to spin like tornadoes. And the wind speeds inside these firestorms get up to 200, 300 miles an hour. And they have funnels of flames that go up 300 and 400 feet into the air. Now, you can't get anywhere near that when you're on the ground. You can't get anywhere near that to fight that. But the worst prophecy in the Henoch prophecy that says, in the future, the greatest disaster in recorded history will occur in the North American continent, where nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons will run outside of human control in an automated fashion. So I think that ties in some way to transhumanism. There was going to be some kind of automatic systems. Now, this for sure isn't going to happen yet. I mean, there's still a possibility that these things may be averted. But, boy, we better wake up, and we better wake up quick.
Right. I agree. Well, it seems to me like things are spinning out of control right now. We've got the Ebola stuff going on. We've got border issues. We've got, the list goes on and on, conflict everywhere. Whatever's happening, it's like stirring up a hornet's nest. It just seems to me like there's more and more conflict, and things are festering. People are frustrated. The economy's not real good. So, yeah, we can go down the list of things that are happening on a material level. And, of course, I think in order to grow spiritually, sometimes those things need to fall away. And I don't say that with on a dark side of it, but literally, I mean, sometimes it takes something like that to move people to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be that, unfortunately, to wake up a lot of folks.
And if this doesn't wake them up, Mark, I don't know what's going to wake them up, honestly. I mean, we've got things happening on this planet. We've got anomalies. We've got the magnetic, magnetosphere having, a partial collapse, at least. It's very weak. And so we've got a lot going on here, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. I mean, there's things happening, and you have to listen to the Earth. First, we need to listen to the planet, what it's saying, what it's communicating, the animals, the wildlife, and of course, we've done a lot to induce a destruction there. So, not we personally, but the illusion of the powers that be.
The Ferguson riots, the war in the Ukraine, it goes on and on. These incredible fires, Fukushima, which we forgot about.
Right. Well, I haven't forgotten about it, but yeah, it seems to be kind of shoved under the carpet for the most part.
Yeah, there are some of the folks that I know in the community that are doing shows on this now, evidently in British Columbia, up in the ocean in that area. They're just finding massive dead zones.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's just, it's so depressing. It's almost
sad.
Yeah. I don't even like to. I had to take a break from Fukushima for a while.
Well, yeah, the deeper you dive, the more you get, the more information you start picking up on and receiving. And, of course, they've got kind of a blackout going on over there, so you really can't get any real detail.
Have you yet listened to or watched any of the YouTubes on the war in Ukraine?
I haven't.
Oh, man.
So busy.
You should do that. You should really, really do that. That's a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm. Between that and the Middle East and everything else that's going on, too.
Right.
Yeah.
I haven't really even been following that whole thing.
Well, it's just so mad. It's just so insane that it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, literally, it's insanity in motion, and it's recklessness and, such defective programming, if you ask me. There's so many things wrong with it.
Well, I think, I don't know that this is the case exactly for sure, but I think in 1933, FDR, he invoked something called the Emergency Powers Act, which suspended our Constitution. And even Karen Hudes has come out and said that, and I think what she said occurred even before then, maybe in 1871, our Constitution was suspended by the Federal Reserve. So we've been under the illusion that we had a functioning Constitution, but I think we've been our Constitution has been suspended for centuries. And we just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the people, a lot of our senators and whatnot that go up there, the ones that go into these groups that have these secret meetings, they know this. I mean, you couldn't have a National Defense Authorization Act, which wipes out all of our constitutional rights. They can now put us and detain us indefinitely for whatever reason they deem appropriate. We don't have the right to a fair trial anymore. They couldn't make these laws if our Constitution wasn't suspended. At least that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's madness going on without a doubt. It's lawlessness in motion. And of course, when you look at the Earth itself, I mean, there are no lifeboats on this world. I mean, this is our planet. This is the planet we're on right now, at least on this timeline, until we go elsewhere. But in the meantime, you obviously, either they're very confident that they can go elsewhere with some sort of a black space program, or they're very stupid. I mean, which one is it? Because they're making reckless decisions across the board. And I don't want to get too political here, but you know what? I've seen nothing but incompetent actions and activities going on across the board in the United States and elsewhere. It makes you wonder what's going on here at the expense of everybody else, at the expense of people and the masses, and not only the masses, but the animals, the wildlife, the Earth itself. I mean, recklessness. I could go on about that. I'll tell you what, though, that could be another 2-hour show right there. But listen, we're getting ready to wrap this up soon enough. But I do want to thank you very much for being on tonight, Mark. You're very dear on so many different levels. You're very sincere and knowledgeable, and I appreciate the work and the research you've done with the Billy Meyer material. It's incredible, and the way you present it, it's so it's just with a lot of wisdom, and I do appreciate that.
Well, I thank you for bringing me on and for giving me the opportunity to share this with people. For some reason, it's easier to talk about on someone else's radio show. I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, I don't know unless I just spin your wheels in the different directions. But yeah, I would propose people actually do take a look at your website and your radio shows, because you cover so much of the Meyer material with your blog talk.
Oh, yeah. And I've this month covered more on Revolution Radio. We had a couple. You know who I've been having a hard time getting back on this show? And I think he's just getting interfered with, is Kevin Annett. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. He was at the Mind Control Summit out in Vegas. Well, he wasn't there physically, but he was there presenting through Skype.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know you were familiar with his
Oh, yeah.
work. Yeah, he's involved with bringing some of these people involved in human sacrifice and things like that to justice. And are you familiar with all
Well,
that?
I was a little bit familiar with something connected with the Vatican and the corruption associated over there. Is that right?
Yeah. He was a clergyman in Canada, and he found out that there were these hardcore people involved in pedophilia in his own congregation. So when he, brought it up or whatever, they just fired him. And then he learned about some church, some big church, might be in Montreal. Can't remember exactly where there's some ritualistic group where they do this child sacrifice. Anyway. So, yeah, I think he's getting a lot of pushback. Another really interesting person that I talked to was a woman named Melanie Houston from the Ohio Environmental Council. And what I think was so interesting about that particular interview is the danger of fracking. And I didn't realize how, every fracking well pollutes like 1 to 8 million gallons of water. If you can believe that, they mix hundreds of these toxic chemicals in this water.
Right.
And there's more and more problems than just that even. But
right. Well, that's what I mean by recklessness. I mean, there are things that we can do. There's an alternative to everything. And, if you're destroying the environment and things are starting to happen, which is like chain reaction of events that are not so healthy for the wildlife or the animals or people, chances are you might want to change the direction you're going in. I mean, that's just a normal kind of behavioral shift. But these guys don't seem to get that message.
Yeah, I hope we're not headed for a civil war in the United States. That's a prophecy, by the way. Getting back to the Meyer material, it says that there will be 2 civil wars in the United States and that the United States will be broken up into 5 different regions. Who knows if that's actually going to happen? I mean, again, these are prophecies.
Right. Well, there's timelines, too. He's looking at a timeline. Of course,
Sure.
It can change due to the collective and the direction of people where they're heading in consciousness, of course. But look where they're heading, Mark. I have to ask you. I mean, I'm concerned about where they're going.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm not part of that equation. I try to rise above it and just be neutral and observing it. But I tell you what, this is like madness. And most people probably don't see it. They're too busy working. But I mean, how can you not notice this?
Yeah. Well, it says there will be civil wars and anarchy in America. I know we're running close on time, but I'll read this real quick.
Okay.
It says, yet the misery on earth will continue as 2 terrible civil wars will break out in America, whereby one will follow the other. Afterwards, the United States of America will break apart and deadly hostility will prevail among her. That leads to the division into 5 different territories, and it cannot be prevented that the sectarian fanatics will also play a dictatorial role. But that's the civil wars. And we don't know. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, it's sometimes history repeats itself in the worst ways, and we have had a civil war here before on this soil, so.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, I mean, sometimes there is a bleed-through effect, and what I was talking about before, I mean, when you don't raise your level of consciousness to the next appropriate level of your own spiritual evolution, and I'm talking mass collectives, then you're going to go backwards and start getting derailed with all this other, what I call false programming and false belief systems and mechanisms and lower astral debris. Of course, people are operating and functioning it, with it.
And the Henoch prophecies also prophesied about the destruction of the World Trade Center as well.
Wow. What year was that?
I think it's the same, 1995.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
That's pretty fascinating. Well, I think he was tracked for a reason by the government. I mean, they knew he was onto something. They knew he had a connection. And most contactees usually get tracked.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not unheard of at all. I mean, there's a reason for that. It's a threat to national security.
Every time, or threat to the cabal.
Well, yeah, because you're accessing multidimensional information, or you have connections with beings that are not part of the program. So, yeah it's going to be a threat. Absolutely it is.
Do you know it is illegal in the United States to have contact with an extraterrestrial?
Well, Mark, we are extraterrestrials, so, I don't know what to say about that. We're all star people, any way you look at it. So, hey.
That's true. On the one hand, they say extraterrestrials don't exist. There's no evidence of that. But by the way, we're going to take the time to write this law that you can't have contact.
You know darn well that we are star beings in a matrix, and that yes, we are the ancestors we seek are us, actually, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I don't even believe it, I know it. So and I'm sure other people can relate as well. But we have those abilities, and they've been shut down and switched off deliberately by certain powers. I've talked about this before, but you know that saying, we are walking each other home. I love that saying, because I think that's what we're doing here on this timeline, where we're just walking each other home. And we're reminding each other of our divinity, of our celestial heritage, of our divine right of a higher self, oversoul, superconscious, and moving on to the next level of our evolution. We have a right to do that. And nobody has the right to control or manipulate that. No one. And I think that's very important.
I had never heard that before.
You never heard that before? We were walking each other home? Oh, yeah. I love it. I actually saw it was like a poster or something I saw with two people walking down a road and the stars are out. And that's really what it boils down to. You know, your spiritual brothers and sisters are every person you encounter because it's a matrix. I mean, it's a suit they wear, but within there's the soul structure, there's the cellular memory, there's that consciousness, that reflection of the universe that we all contain. So at least that's the way I see it.
You know, when Billy was just 4 years old, he was living in a little town called B.A, Switzerland, and he woke up in the middle of the night, one starry night, and he climbed out a lower window there in his bedroom, and he sat down on a bench that his father had built, and he looked up at this beautiful starry night, and he heard his own lips say this. He says, "My life exists because of the love of creation." And he heard his own lips say, "Since ancient times, you've lived among the stars." Now, this little young boy had that profound of experience, only 4 years old. This before he had any extraterrestrial contact.
He almost sounds like a walk-in, or what you would call a walk-in, you know. Ascending in, or sounds like a born master without a doubt. And that's, once again, that's the connection to the higher self, oversoul, superconscious connection, because that's the one that's overseeing your existence here on this planet, and it's accessing the Akashic records and everything else. So very, very amazing. To think about him being a farmer. I mean, obviously he was plugged into something, and he still is. You don't get information like that just being a farmer. Okay.
Well, he said that everything that exists in the whole universe is a manifestation of the might and the infinite and true love of that mighty universal consciousness that we simply call creation.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. I think his material is incredible and philosophical and has a lot of depth to it. And once again, I really appreciate you being on tonight. We got about 3 minutes left here. Excuse me. But I do want to mention we have Night Fright Encore coming up with guest Brett Luter. I hope I said that right. So that should be a good show coming up next with Night Fright. Stay tuned for that on Dark Matter Radio Network. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. I hope you enjoyed the material we presented tonight. And, well, actually, Mark presented. It's phenomenal, and there's so many levels to it, Mark. And once again, I think you could pretty much study this data the rest of your life and still learn each day.
Oh, that's very true. There's so much we didn't even chat about tonight. But, it's really good to take 2 hours to cover this.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. We've covered a lot of material, and still I'd like to have you back sometime when you're ready, because you do have so much to offer, and there's so many levels to the information. And once again, they do ring true insofar as the timelines go and what people are experiencing from day to day. There's definitely a connection there, without a doubt.
Well, I'd sure like to see us get out of this terrible trend that we're in.
Well, I agree with you on that one. Did he ever mention anything about interception with a higher species to help us out when we need them?
He said that after this is over, it'll take 800 years for us to... No, that's not very encouraging.
I won't be here. I'll be off-world. I'll come back and help you guys out, right? No, I won't.
But he said we will eventually become a spacefaring society. Many of us will move off the Earth to worlds, beautiful other worlds that have high oxygen content to finish off our evolution. Because he said this beautiful blue world will not be around here long enough for the Earth human to finish his evolution.
That's almost sad, but according to Ascension teachings, that this planet itself is becoming a star. So it's ascending into a star. And I tend to believe that. So we'll see. It could be the blue star rising. It could be the blue star Kachina, although other people will say it's something else. But I suspect this Earth is the blue star rising. That's my own take on it anyway.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that sometime. And next time you come on, I'll definitely want to talk to you about the sun and where you feel it was birthed from, where it came from.
And the Meyer material says the sun is in the latter stages of its life. So more bad news there.
Morphing into another design. Well, energy never dissipates. It just changes form, right?
That's true.
So that's all we know. I mean, literally, that's what we do anyway. So looks like we're getting ready to run out of time here in the Illusion of Time. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great week. And thank you, Keith. Thank you, Mark.
Good night.
Good night.